Here are the headlines for Thursday morning, August 22, 2024. Trump endorsement? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to address the nation on Friday morning. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is set to address the nation in a speech in Phoenix on Friday, amid speculation that he will endorse Donald Trump for president or drop out of the race and join forces with him. Kennedy's running mate, Nicole Shanahan, recently suggested that the campaign may consider joining forces with Trump to prevent Vice President Kamala Harris from winning the election. Trump has expressed interest in a potential endorsement deal, stating that he would love an endorsement from Kennedy and would consider offering him a cabinet position in exchange. The move comes as some speculate that Kennedy could make a strong head of Trump's Central Intelligence Agency in a nod to his father, President John F. Kennedy, who had a tumultuous relationship with the agency. Wall Street outraged over latest epic fuck-up by Biden's Labor Department. The Bureau of Labor Statistics released its annual CES preliminary benchmark announcement revision, which included an update on how many jobs in the past year were overestimated, but the release was marred by gross incompetence and politicization. The report was delayed by 30 minutes, causing widespread confusion and frustration among traders and economists, and some banks managed to obtain key payroll numbers through a phone call, while others were left waiting. When the data was finally released, it showed that payrolls will likely be revised down by 818,000 for the 12 months through March, the biggest downward revision to job numbers since 2009. The delay and subsequent selective disclosure have raised concerns about fair access to market-moving information and the integrity of financial markets in the United States. Staggering incompetence, Biden's Commerce Secretary is not familiar with the Bureau of Labor. Gina Raimondo, the United States Commerce Secretary, expressed skepticism about the recent downward revision of jobs data, suggesting that former President Trump was behind it. However, when informed that the data comes from her own administration's Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics, Raimondo responded by saying, "I am not familiar with that." This response has raised eyebrows, given that she is responsible for overseeing the collection and distribution of economic data in the United States. United States jobs revised down by 818,000 in election year shocker, second worst revision in United States history. The Bureau of Labor Statistics released its latest jobs report, which was met with skepticism by some due to concerns about the accuracy of the data. The report showed a rise in the unemployment rate, but some argued that this was due to temporary factors such as Hurricane Beryl and weaker hiring. Others pointed out that the response rates for household surveys have declined significantly since the pandemic, making the data less reliable. Some even accused the Department of Labor of using propaganda tactics to shape public opinion about the economy. As a result, there are calls to abolish the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or at least overhaul its methods for collecting and reporting data on unemployment. 2 minutes of hate. Democrats roll surreal, unhinged attack montage on loop at the Democratic National Committee. The Democratic National Convention in Chicago featured a disturbing display of hatred towards political opponents, including images of lawmakers such as Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz depicted as cockroaches, and Elon Musk shown deep-throating a phallic object, labeled MEGA sickle. The event highlighted the Democratic Party's increasing leanings towards far-left ideology with emphasis on wealth redistribution and re-education camp. This radical shift has been likened to a deranged mutation of George Orwell's 1984 and Ayn Rand's We the Living, raising concerns about the party's true intentions and the future of democracy in the United States. Taxpayer-funded posters in London proclaim, "Hey, straight white men, pass the power." A taxpayer-funded group in London is displaying posters that read, "Hey, straight white men, pass the power." The posters were designed by an art project called the Artichoke Trust and were created by a black artist from Marseille. The displays have sparked controversy, with some questioning what power straight white men are supposed to give up in a society where they're already disenfranchised. The issue has drawn comparisons to anti-mass migration stickers that were deemed hate speech, while affirming that it's okay to be white is considered a criminal offense in the United Kingdom. After undercover operations, Texas launches investigation into organizations illegally registering non-citizens to vote. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton launched an investigation into organizations allegedly registering non-citizens to vote following undercover operations that found multiple nonprofit groups opening booths outside of Texas Department of Public Safety driver's license offices. The Election Integrity Unit discovered these organizations were assisting with voter registration, sparking concerns about the possibility of organizations illegally registering non-citizens to vote in elections. Paxton stated that any wrongdoing would be punished to the fullest extent of the law, as voting or registering to vote is a crime if you are not a United States citizen. The descent is upon us. Forget the Sam rule. This indicator has perfectly predicted every United States recession since 1930. The Federal Reserve's efforts to control inflation without pushing the United States economy into a recession have been put to the test as interest rates continue to rise. Since the global financial crisis, inflation had remained around the Fed's target level until COVID-19, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine disrupted this trend by releasing large volumes of money into the economy to limit the financial damage of lockdowns on consumers and businesses, resulting in a surge in inflation. The historic accuracy of the Sound Rule, which has been triggered by recent unemployment data, suggests that the United States may be entering a recession, but mitigating factors such as an influx of labor supply driving up unemployment rather than a significant decrease in job openings may indicate otherwise. Top Biden-Harris official calls for queering nuclear weapons. A high-ranking official in the Biden administration's Department of Energy, Sneha Nair, is facing controversy over her academic papers that advocate for the queering of nuclear weapons. Nair, who was appointed as special assistant at the National Nuclear Security Administration less than a year ago, has written about the relationship between queerness and nuclear policy, claiming that discrimination against queer people can undermine nuclear security. Her papers also argue that equity and inclusion for queer people are essential for creating effective nuclear policy and reducing nuclear risk. The appointment of Nair to her position has raised concerns about the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives on national security. Met Office records hottest day of the year at a weather station next to a massive heat-generating electricity substation. The Met Office in the United Kingdom has been criticized for its inaccurate temperature measurements due to the placement of weather stations near heat-generating sources, such as electricity substations. One example is the Cambridge National Institute for Agricultural Botany Station, which is located just a few meters away from a large electricity substation complex that releases huge amounts of heat into the atmosphere. Despite this obvious source of temperature corruption, the Met Office has given the station a Class 1 designation with no temperature uncertainties due to local natural uncertainties due to local natural influences. Similar issues have been found at other locations used by the Met Office, including the notorious Bingley No. 2 site and the Amersham station, which is also located near an electricity substation. The money is on the dresser. Harris campaign pays influencer army to feign enthusiasm. Kamala Harris campaign is attempting to turn around her low popularity ratings by launching an astroturfing campaign involving 200 social media influencers to promote her at the Democratic National Convention. Despite internal polling showing a disaster, the campaign hopes that this strategy will convince voters that she's not one of the most unpopular politicians in modern history. Harris' team is using motifs like chartreuse green and coconut trees to create a brat summer vibe on social media, trying to compete with Donald Trump's online presence. The campaign aims to enlist 5,000 online influencers by November's election, offering them access to delegates and studio space at the convention. Weight loss, drug linked to 45% higher suicidality, World Health Organization data shows. A new study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association Network, Open, has linked semaglutide, an active ingredient in weight loss and diabetic drugs such as Wegovy and Ozempic, to suicidal ideation. The researchers analyzed over 36 million reports in a pharmacovigilance database and found that semaglutide was associated with a 45% greater likelihood of suicidal ideation compared to other drugs. In contrast, another weight loss drug called liraglutide showed no significant link to suicidality. The study's findings have sparked concern among experts, who note that the association between semaglutide and suicidality warrants urgent clarification. New footage shows Trump shooter casually strolling around Pennsylvania rally. New footage has emerged of Thomas Matthew Crooks, the man who attempted to assassinate former President Donald Trump at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, walking around merchandise stalls before the attempt. The footage shows Crooks wearing the same gray t-shirt, shorts, and sneakers he was later seen in while taking aim at Trump on the rooftop. Local police had spotted Crooks minutes before the assassination attempt as he jumped between rooftops, preparing to get into position to kill Trump, but they were unable to alert the Secret Service because they were not communicating on the same radio frequency. If Trump wins, the Federal Reserve will stop cutting at 4.50%. The Bureau of Labor Statistics revision to its payrolls estimates for April 2023 to March 2024 resulted in the largest drop since the global financial crisis at minus 818,000. The peak in cumulative post-COVID net payrolls growth was 7.23 million in February 2023 and then drifted lower to 6.38 million as of July. This raises questions about whether U.S. workers are truly benefiting from economic recovery. Additionally, the ongoing labor market uncertainty, combined with inflation risks and geopolitical tensions, is expected to impact the global economy. The Middle East war could have a lasting impact on oil prices unless Iranian and Saudi supply or the Straits of Hormuz become involved. 44 Democratic National Committee delegates snub Harris with presence vote. 44 delegates at the Democratic National Convention voted present during the roll call vote, a symbolic protest following Kamala Harris' official nomination earlier this month. This number is significantly higher than the 5 delegates who abstained in 2020. The majority of the 44 present votes likely came from 30 delegates representing the uncommitted protest movement, which has expressed disappointment with President Biden's decisions on war crimes and Palestinian issues. Delegates from 13 states, including Washington and Minnesota, voted present to pressure Harris to support a ceasefire and an embargo on United States weapons to Israel. PCRE. The Western world has succumbed to tyranny. Journalist Richard Medhurst was arrested and detained under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act in Britain for 24 hours without being told what he was accused of or when he would be questioned. Despite being released unconditionally, Medhurst feels his bail is not truly unconditional and that a muzzle has been placed on him as a journalist, making it uncertain if or how he can work during the next months. He believes the Terrorism Act is out of control and has no place in a democracy, citing examples of other journalists who have been targeted for their reporting, including Julian Assange and Craig Murray. Medhurst argues that counterterrorism laws should be used to fight actual terrorism, not journalism, and that freedom of the press and speech are under attack as the state cracks down on people speaking out against government complicity and genocide. Don't expect a radical response from Russia to Washington's involvement in Ukraine's invasion of Kyrgyzstan. Russia's foreign spy agency SVR revealed that the Ukrainian armed forces operation in the Kursk region was prepared with the participation of the special services of the United States, Great Britain, and Poland. The units involved underwent combat coordination in training centers in Great Britain and Germany. This coincided with the Russian Foreign Ministry summoning the United States Chargé d'Affaires to protest American journalists' illegal crossing of their border for propaganda purposes. Russia is convinced that the United States orchestrated this unprecedented provocation, thus raising questions about how it will respond. However, Russia has consistently refused to escalate in response to previous provocations, and President Putin's cautious approach is likely to continue due to his fear of inadvertently triggering World War III. California wants to reward illegal aliens with zero-down, no-payment home loans. California lawmakers have advanced a bill that would allow illegal aliens to access zero-down payment loans through the state's first-time homebuyer program, prioritizing them over citizens and veterans. The California Dream for All program would provide loans of up to 20% of the home's purchase price, with no payments due until the property is sold or refinanced. Critics argue that this legislation is a slap in the face to California citizens who are already struggling under economic hardship, and that it will worsen the state's deficit and increase the tax burden on hardworking Californians. 1 million square foot office building in Center City, Philadelphia appraised for 25% less than 2021. A Philadelphia office building located at 18th and Market Streets and owned by Shorenstein Properties saw its appraisal value drop 25% from $282.1 million in 2021 to $211.3 million this year. The stress rate for the city's office market is 52%, with several properties facing challenges, including 1515 Markets and 1500 Markets D, which have fallen into receivership and have occupancy rates as low as 73%. Despite this, some buildings, like 2400 Markets Est, remain nearly fully occupied, with a net cash flow that is only 2% down from when its loan was underwritten. Shutout in Chi-Town, Jewish groups blocked from marching during the Democratic National Convention. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson refused to grant permits to Jewish protesters supporting Israel, forcing them to gather on private property away from the Democratic National Convention. Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian protesters were given accommodations by the city and received support from President Joe Biden in his convention address. The treatment of Jewish groups is a stark contrast to when Nazis were allowed to march through Skokie, Illinois 46 years ago, despite overwhelming opposition, as a milestone moment for free speech. Judge, Virginia School District must allow transgender student on girls' tennis team. A federal judge in the Eastern District of Virginia has ruled that Hanover County Public Schools cannot prevent an 11-year-old transgender student from playing on a girls' middle school tennis team while the student's lawsuit against the school board continued. The student, who was born male but identifies as female, had previously tried out for and earned a place on the team, but the school board later barred her from participating due to concerns about fairness in competition. The American Civil Liberties Union of Virginia had filed a lawsuit on behalf of the student, arguing that the school board's decision violated Title IX of the United States Constitution and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Kamala Harris's communist agenda faces harsh reality. The presidential campaign of Kamala Harris is struggling, with her economic plan being ridiculed across the ideological spectrum for its reliance on centrally controlled wage and price controls, which could lead to shortages and inflation. Meanwhile, Argentina's new leader Javier Milei has implemented policies that have put his country on a path to economic success, including slashing inflation and abolishing rent control. Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, has been criticized for his support of communist China and his handling of the Black Lives Matter riots in Minneapolis. The Trump campaign is capitalizing on these weaknesses, with supporters pounding Harris-Walz with heavy artillery, including attacks on their record on the border, inflation, and other issues. Israeli assassinations are near daily in Lebanon, airstrikes reaching deeper. Israeli airstrikes have struck deep into Lebanese territory in recent days, targeting Hezbollah weapons storage facilities in the Bekaa Valley, approximately 40 miles from the Israeli border. The Israel Defense Forces described the strikes as retaliation for deadly Hezbollah rocket attacks, which were reportedly launched in response to an Israeli strike that killed a Hezbollah official. The latest escalation has resulted in over 200 rockets being fired at Israel by Hezbollah on Tuesday, and at least 50 more on Wednesday, in addition to 8 people wounded and 1 killed. Ford ditches plans for electric sport utility vehicle as industry continues to backpedal from electric vehicles. Ford is canceling plans for a large 3-row electric sport utility vehicle due to pricing pressures and increased competition from China, instead opting to focus on hybrid versions of its popular Explorer and Expedition models. The company will take $1.9 billion in related special charges and write-downs as a result. Ford Chief Financial Officer John Lawler commented that the decision reflects where the market is and where customers are, and that the company will pivot and adjust accordingly. Despite this, Ford is still moving forward with several full electric vehicles, including an electric commercial van in 2026 and 2 new pickup trucks in 2027. Northwestern implements mandatory anti-hate trainings following chaotic Gaza campus protests. Northwestern University is introducing mandatory training for all students on preventing anti-Semitism and Islamophobia on campus, following a surge of hate speech and death threats against Jewish students earlier this year over the Israel-Gaza conflict. The training will be provided during incoming student orientation in September and over the fall quarter for all returning students, as well as to staff and faculty. The move comes after pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli demonstrators clashed on campus, prompting a nationwide debate about leftist institutions indoctrinating vulnerable young minds with hate speech and intolerance. Return to sender. Panama starts flying migrants home at United States taxpayer expense. The Republic of Panama initiated a program to fly back illegal immigrants to their native countries at the cost of United States taxpayers. The repatriation flight program aims to end Panama's role as a major funnel for migrants heading to the United States, with over 500,000 migrants crossing the Darien Gap jungle wilderness last year. The first flight carried 29 Colombians with criminal records back home, and more flights are planned to destinations such as India and Ecuador. The United States government will cover Panama's expenses of up to $6 million for deporting people who enter Panama illegally, in addition to providing equipment, transportation, and logistic support. Global stocks hit all-time high with Jay Powell expected to pre-announce rate cuts. The global economy is showing signs of easing inflationary pressures as lower energy prices boost the narrative about rate cuts. Brent crude oil prices have fallen to $76.05 per barrel, their lowest level since January, while yields on 10-year Italian BPs have closed at their lowest since December. Asian markets are trading cautiously ahead of Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's speech at Jackson Hole tomorrow, with the Nikkei and Hang Seng posting modest gains, but other indices seeing little movement or declines. Today we'll see the release of August flash PIS from Europe and the United States, offering an initial indication of how the global economy has performed into this month. Dovish Federal Reserve and dismal job revisions send bonds, big tech, Bitcoin, and bullion higher. A record downward revision in payrolls combined with the Federal Open Market Committee's dovish bias led to soaring rate cut expectations today. This sent bond prices surging, while stocks initially rallied but later gave back gains. The yield curve steepened as Treasury yields tumbled, with short end outperforming, and the dollar continued its slump to 5-month lows. Bitcoin surged above $61,000, helped by a potential short squeeze, and gold rallied after the Federal Open Market Committee's minutes were released. Crude prices tracked bond yields lower, dropping to $71 per barrel. Diversity is a false religion to destroy America. The National Association of Scholars and the Heritage Foundation are hosting a panel discussion on diversity ideology in higher education following recent reports documenting millions of dollars spent by state universities on diversity initiatives. The Maryland affiliate's report highlights how these programs often promote race-based practices that may be illegal under federal civil rights laws and the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. In Virginia, similar expenditures have skyrocketed, with over $20 million spent in 2023 on diversity programs at the University of Virginia alone. Critics argue that this diversity contagion undermines social cohesion and pits Americans against each other, and that it is anti-American and preoccupied with groups based on race or sex, rather than individual talent and character. America's founding documents emphasize limited government and individual opportunity, but diversity ideologies are increasingly prevalent in educational institutions, fostering poisonous identity politics and undermining excellence. The political matrix sustains the illusion of freedom. The government of the United States is failing its citizens at all levels, from local municipalities to the federal level. The author argues that it's time for people to take action and reclaim their power by participating in local governance and holding elected officials accountable. This can be achieved by attending town council meetings, demanding accountability, and refusing to tolerate corruption, intolerance, and incompetence. By doing so, citizens can make a difference locally and potentially inspire positive change at the national level. Exposing the leftist projectionistas Victor Davis Hanson. Kamala Harris is accused of exhibiting 3 negative traits: projection, hypocrisy, and concealment of her real intention. Harris projects by accusing others of doing what she herself is doing, such as being divisive or lacking empathy. She is hypocritical in her demands for photo identification at her rallies while blasting voter ID laws as racist. Harris also conceals her true intentions, such as supporting fracking and drilling only to please voters in swing states, when in reality she has consistently advocated against these practices. Critics argue that the left should be honest about their vision for America, which includes massive government redistributive action, enormous spending increases, more taxes, and a globalist view of the country. China's CDC reports new COVID-19 cases hit nearly 20%. The Chinese Communist Party's claim that the COVID-19 pandemic is under control in China may be misleading, as numerous residents from different provinces have reported ongoing infections and sudden deaths among people of all ages. Despite receiving COVID-19 vaccines for earlier variants, many individuals are still getting infected, and some are dying suddenly, including young people. The situation varies by region, with some areas experiencing more severe outbreaks than others. Residents also report that doctors often do not disclose the truth about the cause of illnesses or deaths, making it difficult to determine the true extent of the pandemic in China. Tech tycoon Mike Lynch confirmed dead after tornado capsized super yacht. The Italian Coast Guard confirmed the recovery of 5 bodies from the wreckage of the Bayesian super yacht Sky, including British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch, Morgan Stanley chairman Jonathan Bloomer, his wife Judith Bloomer, Clifford Chance lawyer Christopher Morvillo, and his wife Nita Morvillo. The yacht was hit by a tornado and capsized on Monday, resulting in the loss of all 5 lives on board. Authorities are still searching for Lynch's 18-year-old daughter. The Italian Sea Group CEO Giovanni Costantino stated that the super yacht's design and construction were flawless, suggesting human error may have contributed to the sinking. A climatologist noted that the warm waters around the yacht at the time of the incident created an enormous source of energy contributing to such storms. Canadian freight rail shuts down as labor talks collapse, strike declared. Members head to picket lines. A labor dispute between Canada's largest railroads, Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City, and the Teamsters Canada Rail Conference has resulted in over 9,000 union rail employees being locked out, prompting a simultaneous strike. The lockout began at 12:01 Eastern Time on Thursday, with both sides blaming each other for the failure to reach an agreement. A prolonged labor stoppage could severely disrupt Canada's complex rail network, sending shockwaves through the United States economy and potentially reigniting inflation, with estimated trade disruptions of $180 million to $370 million per day. Fascism 2.0, the changing face of social media censorship. Social media platforms have become closed and proprietary, enabling new media power structures that can suppress or boost the virality of posts. These platforms have implemented policing and reporting using large language models, which are also being used to govern human behavior. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced a police initiative to use social media to identify individuals involved in public disorder, illustrating how these automated reporting systems are poised to be used beyond social media and in the context of law enforcement. A quarter of Brits consider turning off the heat in winter as power bills soar. About 1/4 of households in the United Kingdom are so worried about their electricity bills that they're considering spending next heating season without heat or hot water. The concern follows plans by Ofcom, the National Electricity Market Regulator, to raise the cap on bills by another 9.2%, equal to £150 or $195. Citizens Advice reported that 48% of respondents in its survey had said they would have to turn down the heat or turn it off to survive winter financially, while 34% said it would be difficult for them to afford food, mortgage payments, or childcare this winter because of higher electricity prices. Ukraine tried to attack Kursk nuclear plant to stage provocation. Russian President Vladimir Putin accused Ukraine of attempting to attack the Kursk nuclear power station, one of Russia's 3 biggest nuclear power plants, which has recently come under threat due to nearby incursions by Ukraine's armed forces. Putin stated that an overnight attack occurred, but presented no specific evidence and briefed the International Atomic Energy Agency on the situation. The Kursk region's acting governor reported that the situation at the plant was stable. This is not the first accusation of its kind, with Russia previously alleging a plot to attack the facility and accuse Moscow of a self-attack to justify strikes on Ukraine's nuclear energy facilities. How the world listens to music. The International Federation of the Phonographic Industries report, Engaging with Music 2023, surveyed over 43,000 internet users across 26 countries to gain insight into the music industry from the perspective of fans. On average, respondents listened to 20.7 hours of music each week, up from 20.1 hours per week in 2022. The survey found that people listen to 8 or more different genres and use 7 or more different methods to engage with music, with audio streaming making up 32% of the total hours spent engaging with music, followed by video streaming at 31% and radio at 17%. Dem spin, elaborate Trump, Logan Act violation, conspiracy theory based on call which didn't happen. Democrats are in desperation mode searching for another Trump-related scandal ahead of November's elections. They're now focusing on an alleged phone call between Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that supposedly never took place. The claim originated from an Axios report citing two unnamed sources briefed on the call, which allegedly occurred on August 14th. Trump is accused of attempting to influence Netanyahu regarding ongoing Gaza ceasefire negotiations. Despite a respected world leader denying the call ever happened, pundits are referencing anonymous reports to fuel their claims, spinning it into a conspiracy theory alleging Trump is actively blocking a potential Israel-Gaza truce deal and running his own private foreign policy campaign while circumventing the Biden administration. Supreme Court urged to overturn federal ghost gun regulation. The Supreme Court is set to hear the case Garland v. Vanderstock on October 8th, which challenges the federal government's rule regulating so-called ghost guns that can be assembled at home. Jennifer Vanderstock, a former police officer, filed a lawsuit against United States Attorney General Merrick Garland, arguing that the regulation exceeds the authority of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives under the Gun Control Act of 1968. The rule requires individuals to add serial numbers to homemade firearms and mandates background checks for consumers who buy gun kits from dealers. Vanderstock claims that the regulation is inconsistent with the Gun Control Act's definition of firearm and argues that only Congress can make changes to the law, not the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Israel Diamond Exchange in crisis as exports plummet in 2024. The Israel Diamond Exchange reported a decline in exports and membership in 2024, with the number of retirees exceeding new members for the first time in its history. The exchange's president, Nissim Zuaretz, stated that only 30 new members joined in the past year compared to 200 in previous years. The country's net exports of rough diamonds saw a 6% decrease, while polished diamond exports dropped by 33% in the first 7 months of 2024. The slump is attributed to a slowdown in sales to the United States and China, as well as collapsing diamond prices, with former Diamond Exchange President Boaz Moldowski estimating that 80% of the trade's difficulties were due to the global slump and 20% to the war on Gaza. FOMC minutes show vast majority. See September cut as appropriate. The Federal Reserve's committee has decided to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 5.25 to 5.5% in support of its goals to achieve maximum employment and inflation at the rate of 2% over the longer run. The committee judges that the risks to achieving its employment and inflation goals continue to move into better balance, but notes that the economic outlook is uncertain and will be attentive to the risks to both sides of its dual mandate. Goldman's key takeaway from call with Foxconn management: artificial intelligence servers continue to ramp up. Foxconn Technology Group, the world's largest contract electronics manufacturer, shared its outlook on artificial intelligence server demand with Goldman analysts. The company remains positive on the AI servers business, which continues to enjoy sequential revenue growth in 2024. Foxconn plans to begin small volume production of full-rack AI servers by the end of 2024 and enter mass production and shipment ramp up in 2025. The company is strategically positioned to capture 40% of the global AI server market with its vertical integration, comprehensive customer base, research and development capability, strong balance sheet, and global production sites, securing its leading market position. Department of Homeland Security can't account for thousands of unaccompanied migrant children, Inspector General finds. The Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General released a report detailing the status of nearly 500,000 unaccompanied migrant children who entered the United States since 2019. The report found that immigration and customs enforcement cannot account for an untold number of these children, with more than 32,000 failing to show up to their court dates and over 291,000 not receiving notices to appear in court. The Inspector General's office recommends implementing guidelines to better track unaccompanied migrant children, citing concerns about trafficking, exploitation, or forced labor for those who do not appear in court. European Union mulls open-ended immobilization of Russian assets. The European Union and the group of 7 leading industrialized nations are working together to provide financial support to Ukraine through a loan backed by frozen Russian assets worth approximately $50 billion. The plan involves using interest proceeds from these frozen assets via a loan guaranteed by the G7 countries, with the European Union and the United States backing $20 billion each, and Japan and the United Kingdom guaranteeing the remaining $10 billion between them. To ensure legal certainty and predictability, the EU is considering either open-ended immobilization of Russian assets or extending sanctions for up to 36 months. Beijing rips Joe Biden for peddling China nuclear threat narrative. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning responded to the New York Times revelation that President Joe Biden approved a new nuclear strategic plan that includes preparations for a simultaneous nuclear war with Russia, China, and North Korea. Mao expressed concern over the report, stating that it proves the United States has been stirring up the so-called China nuclear threat theory in recent years. She emphasized that China maintains a policy of no first use of nuclear weapons and has always kept its nuclear capabilities to a minimum required for national security needs, with no intention to engage in any arms race with any country. Mayo also pointed out that the United States possesses the largest and most advanced nuclear arsenal and adheres to a nuclear deterrence policy based on the first use of nuclear weapons, calling on Washington to set an example of nuclear disarmament and de-escalation instead of hyping fake threats. Soft landing scenario less convincing. United States Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index plunges to 8-month lows. SAMP Global's flash PMI data for August indicates that the manufacturing sector in the United States is declining, while the services sector remains robust. The flash U.S. Services Business Activity Index rose to 55.2, a 2-month high, whereas the flash U.S. Manufacturing Output Index fell to 47.8, a 14-month low. Chris Williamson, chief business economist at SAMP Global Market Intelligence, notes that this divergence may signal an economic slowdown ahead. Despite concerns about inflation and recession, Williamson predicts that the United States will experience robust GDP growth in excess of 2% annualized in the third quarter. Continuing jobless claims hover near 33-month highs. Initial jobless claims have remained steady in the same range for 3 years, with non-seasonally adjusted claims near record lows. The decline in seasonally adjusted and non-seasonally adjusted claims is largely due to Texas's claim normalization post-barrel. However, continuing jobless claims remain at their highest since November 2021. Despite this, some are questioning how the Federal Reserve can justify cutting interest rates to save the labor market when initial claims have been relatively stable. Trump, Vance pledged to reduce crime, refund police. Former President Donald Trump and his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, took their message of improving circumstances for police officers to 2 battleground states on August 20th, 2024, as part of their campaign strategy. During his speech in Michigan, Trump pledged to grant officers greater protection against lawsuits and prosecutions, saying that under his leadership, no community would be surrendered to violent criminals and no citizen would be abandoned to migrant crime. Vance spoke in Wisconsin, stating that if he and Trump are elected, they will end sanctuary cities and protect police from frivolous lawsuits. Federal Open Market Committee minutes preview. Any hints for Powell's Jackson Hole address? The Federal Open Market Committee left interest rates unchanged but made tweaks to its statement that appeared to leave the door open to a rate cut in September. The committee is now attentive to risks on both sides of its mandate, rather than just focusing on inflation risks. Fed Chair Powell revealed that there was a real discussion about reducing rates at this meeting, and noted that the policy rate is clearly restrictive. He added that the chances of a hard landing are low as the economy was neither overheating nor sharply weakening. Recent data has been mixed, but some concerns surrounding the labor market and growth have diminished in recent weeks, with the Fed's focus now shifting more towards its dual mandate rather than just inflation. Stress charts we're watching. When the Standard & Poor's Exchange Index is rising and the skew index SDX is also increasing, investors closely watch this trend as it can lead to market volatility. Long-term investors seeking downside protection often purchase low delta options at a premium, causing the skew to move higher. This leaves dealers with short positions on the downside short gamma, which means that any downward price movement may be magnified as dealers try to hedge by selling deltas. Who is hot and who is not in the Magnificent Seven right now? The 7 largest technology stocks in the world are extremely important and will remain so for a long time, despite some being slightly overvalued and the general perception of artificial intelligence being somewhat exaggerated. These key driver stocks will be analyzed individually from a technical standpoint to evaluate their performance and potential for future growth. 20-year auction sees lackluster demand despite 6 consecutive stop-through. The United States sold $16 billion in 20-year paper in an auction that passed without issues, despite market confusion over the implications of recent dire Bureau of Labor Statistics data on payroll. The auction yielded 4.16%, 30 basis points below last month's yield, and the lowest since July. But bid to cover and internal metrics were subpar, with indirect bidders awarded 71.0% and direct bidders taking 19.3%, leaving dealers holding 9.7% of the paper. Preview and quanda on the Federal Reserve's Jackson Hole Conference. The Federal Reserve's Jackson Hole Conference will take place from Thursday through Saturday, where Chair Powell is expected to deliver a speech on the economic outlook at 10 o'clock New York time on Friday. According to Goldman Sachs' David Miracle, Powell may express more confidence in the inflation outlook and emphasize downside risks in the labor market, which could lead to 3 consecutive 25 basis point cuts in September, November, and December. United States stocks gained after a downward payrolls revision, and the Federal Open Market Committee minutes further supported the consensus for a September Fed cut. To access more news from Newsquawk, users can take 2 steps: subscribe to the free Pre-Market Movers reports, which provide early market insights, and trial Newsquawk's premium real-time audio Newsquawk box for 7 days, offering in-depth coverage of global events. Equities gain modestly. Bonds hampered following European Zone Purchasing Managers Index metrics and pound benefits on its own results. Newsquawk United States market open. The New Squawk platform offers 3 steps to access its financial news and analysis content: subscribing to pre-market movers reports, listening to the Market Open podcast, and trialing the premium real-time audio News Squawk box for 7 days.